Hello everyone. Very warm good evening to each and everyone present in this session. I would like to welcome you all to the much awaited Ask the Alum session, especially curated for the third year students gearing up for their internship season. I am Vaibhav, ASMP coordinator in the Student Alumni Relations Cell, and I will be a moderator for today's session focused on the tech forms. We are joined by distinguished alums who have interned at Google, American Express, and Rubrik to be very specific. They will be sharing their valuable insights about their experiences, their strategies, about what they think you should do and exactly what to not, and other tips that will help you crack some similar opportunities. So get ready for an engaging and enriching Sunday evening. So we'll be starting soon. Just waiting for a couple of moments for all to join. But while we wait for others to join in, I have thought of like let's begin this with a lighter note. I would request our panel like to just give I would love it would be lovely to hear a bit about their journey at IIT Bombay and even the corporate life they are currently indulged into. So if that is feasible, I would like to start off with Govind. So
Yeah, hi. Good evening to those here. So I joined IITB in 2020 and graduated in 2024. I was part of the CSE department. During my time at NCT, I've been part of a lot of stuff. Like I was a part of the AOV IITB tech team there, and functional wise, I was in S3. It was a fun 4 years. Did a lot of different things, and I interned at Rubrik after my third year. And I ended up joining there again as a full time.
okay, it
Yep.
was great. Moving on to Yashwanth Bhaiya.
Hello, guys. Great to see you all. And I still don't feel like I'm in any position to give anyone any advice. But since I was asked to do so, I'll try my best. Uh, yeah, so my degree and my college, well, yeah, I got through them, and I would say I might be somewhat of a bad egg in the bunch because like okay, I had a lot of other things that I was doing in college, a lot of things that might not have been strictly speaking uh, in alignment with my career and stuff, but I got through my degree, and basically, yeah, I had a great time in college. I felt like I lived the childhood that I maybe I paused when I was preparing for JEE. But apart from that, I also interned, and I'm a convert from my internship at Google in my third year. Yeah, that seems like about it. I'll try to think of something else to
Sure.
say later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now moving on to Vinayak. Yeah.
Thanks, Gaurav. Hi, everyone. So, I'm Vinayak, and I also joined IT Bombay in 2020. And it was quite unfortunate that we were part of the COVID batch and missed out the first couple of years. It would have been actually much better now that in retrospect, to have attended college during those first 2 years. But yeah, I think overall, I hope I made enough of my time while I was on campus. And honestly speaking, I do not have a lot of regrets in regards to that. And I interned in MX during my third year, and I also received a PPO shortly after that. And yeah, now and currently I am in Gurgaon, and yeah, that's it.
Okay. So yeah, it was lovely to hear from you all. So now let's formally begin with the much awaited session. So just before we dive in, I just want you all to know that you're free to drop your questions in the chat box, and these will be entertained in the Q&A session at the very end of our session. Okay, so now starting off with the introduction of the panel of this evening. So we have with us Govind Saju, a 2024 graduate from the CSA department who interned as a software engineer at Rubrik and is currently working there full time. Accompanying him is Yashwanth Reddy, a 2025 graduate from the department of CSE, who, similar to Govind Bhaiya, completed a software engineering internship at Google and currently holds a full-time position there. Rounding out our panel is Vinayak Srivastava, a 2024 graduate from the mechanical department who secured a data analyst position in American Express and is currently working in there as a full time. So I welcome you all, and we're really glad to have you three on the main stage for such a valuable session. And in the meantime, we are excited to learn from your journey. So before handing on to our speakers for this evening, I will just brief you out about the main agendas for this evening. So we will start off with just a basic intro and like about the general terms that must be taken care of. Then slowly we will move on to like we will deep dive into the things like the aptitude mastery through DSA, like should we have any language preference, is there any effect of it, the resources to follow, the resume building skills, the soft skills that one must have for the interview, and like such similar things. And finally we'll conclude our session with a Q&A. And again, I want to clarify that you guys are free to drop down your like questions and in the chat box, and that will be entertained later. Okay, so now I would ask the speakers for just a brief overview of some general points they think that they should be taken care of. And on later on, we will dive into the main headlines for the session, as I just mentioned in the briefing. So, okay, let's start off with Govind. Yeah.
I mean, by brief overview, you mean like a small stuff, or are we moving on to the slides? Or uh, Vaibhav?
Yeah, just a second.
All right. So, all right. So, in general, just a few tips and tricks that people may want to keep in mind while preparing for internship. I mean, these are mainly focused at the third year folks who are starting out in their internship in like a month or so. For if since anyone else in the audience today, then you guys have a lot more time, and some of them may not apply just yet. So yeah, so things to keep in mind. I would say definitely some lots and lots and lots of problems. Like reading theory is good to build an understanding of what happens, but what you are going to be doing in your tests or interviews is actually solving problems. So definitely don't skip out on that. And another thing to keep in mind is that what we're doing here is training your thinking process. Right? Training your brain to actually tackle the algorithmic challenges thrown at you during interviews and online assessments. So while practicing, spend time actually struggling with the problem. Not much, like usually, but give it enough time to justice to the problem you've picked up and actually spend some time before jumping to the solution. And after you have uh, solved something, look what more looking at solutions, looking at editorial, etc. And getting idea of what else you have done to gain improve something, maybe improve approaches that could be used uh, etc. Another point I would like probably call out is the understanding applications. That is, understanding a data structure in internals is meaningful. Knowing when to use what is equally good, and uh, that is where the actual challenge comes in actually solving problems. Uh, I personally would say you can view data structures as tools you have to build that you can use to break down any algorithm problems. Right? And practice under pressure. That is actual contests for your OAs or for interviews on time. So don't, I mean, while learning it is okay to take some time to actually spend on the problem, but also make sure you actually do spend time solving in timed conditions. Uh, anything the other panelists want to add here?
Yeah, I would ask Yashwanth Bhaiya being from a similar software engineering role to add-ons for some add-ons to it.
Yeah, so I totally agree with what he said. You need to have a proper balance between some problems where you're trying to be as rigorous as possible and actually, maybe spend 2 3 hours trying to do it yourself, then maybe take a little bit of a hint, but basically set a time frame of about 3 to 4 hours where you tackle a very difficult problem and you do it end to end. So you write the algorithm, you code it. That's a very good exercise, and doing such things will help you push the boundaries of what you know. but having said that, that is not representative of the kind of environment that you will be in when you take tests or when you take interviews. So you need to balance that with timed formats also. Both are important. And yeah, so you solve many problems, that is true. But I have noticed that um, if you're just doing lead code sequentially, like one problem two, problem three, or maybe it's just recommending you some problems. I don't know how good the recommendation is, but there are lead code, the signal to noise ratio is kind of low. Not every problem is, strictly speaking, I would say, like some problems are kind of more grindy. You just have to write a lot of stuff. There's a lot of recursive, especially in recursion and backtracking. So some problems are just, they're not so thought provoking. And you won't find those kinds of questions coming in your tests and interviews. So I would recommend, instead of solve many problems, but do them from maybe some sheets that, there are these YouTubers, Triver, Fraz. These guys have some good resources. Uh, are you guys aware of them, or should I add links to these? You can just, yeah. Can
Yeah,
anyone
like
maybe, yeah.
if we can share it with them later on, so that would work.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah. And instead of just doing things on lead code, there are other websites. There's one particular website I use called Interview Bit. And again, this is 2 years old, so I don't know what is going on right now. A lot of things have changed. There is AI also. So I'm pretty sure ChatGPT can solve any question right now. So you might not even need it. Like the possibilities are manifold. So I don't know. You guys will have to do some research yourself and ask people who are more knowledgeable about these. Maybe who 1 year your seniors would help you more. And like yeah, focus on the basics. Your array. I think that slide is coming up later. I'll save this thing for later. Yeah. So okay. Mm. And most importantly, this is one thing I absolutely want you to feel is you are not. It's not a test. As in, the kind of problems that you will solve on lead code or in interviews, it's not coding problems. These are puzzles. Like for example, I'll give you an example of one problem that I really like. So there's this tall building with 100 floors, and you have an egg, and you're dropping it from the balcony of each floor. So the egg has a certain hardness, so it won't crack. Like if, let's say, you drop it from any of the lower 18 floors, but if you drop it from the 19th floor or above, it cracks. Now you have to figure out what is this threshold of the highest floor from which you can drop it and it still won't break. And you don't have to think about this in terms of data structures, in terms of algorithms. This is your relationship with logic itself. It's very pure, and you can learn to enjoy that. And you can like tackle anything, any problem, any algorithm that you come across with first principles. Don't use your wealth of knowledge. You might have a lot of background, but you need to have that curiosity at a very basic level. Yeah, that's what I'd say. And also, don't cheat. Okay. You have a lot more options now. There's something called Cluely. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but if you're doing an online interview or maybe even a test, I'm not sure. If you're doing an online interview, that thing can just like lay on your screen. It just lies on your screen, and it can listen, overhear your conversation with the other person. It can show you the answers on your screen. Like, yeah, all that is there. So see, I have no idea. I am just the only the idea I have of this AI stuff is from what I hear from other people. I don't have a first-hand experience. So just be cautious with all these things. If you get caught, it's kind of like you get flagged, I think. Maybe one company shares to another company what who got flagged, who didn't get flagged. Like these disciplinary things, it's best you don't like get caught in them. Just find the best practices and follow them. Yeah, that yeah, that's it from me.
That was great, like the way you like told us about the examples and everything. So that was great to hear from your end. Now coming over to Vinayak Bhaiya, and I just want to add a specific question for you too. Like being from a data analyst role, like many students come into like a bit dilemma ki like how is DSA, like what is the importance of DSA for getting into some that kind of role? Like what are the difference in being committing to a SDE role or a data analyst role? So what do you think how like DSA plays like what is the weightage of DSA in like going through your domain? So I just want you to put some significance to that point and then some general tips.
Sure. Gopal. So on the first question that you asked, that how much of an importance DSA plays in analytics roles, so that mostly depends on what the specific kind of role is. Now, in data science, you can have multiple different types of roles. The role which, for example, I am pursuing currently in MX is a more analytics related role, which, to be honest, is not that focused on hardcore coding. So in those kinds of roles, so for example, especially in MX, during your interviews, you won't find a lot of weightage being placed on something like DSA. Even if the interviewer ends up asking you some questions surrounding DSA, they would mostly be very simple. Your basically for in Geeks for Geeks, you have that easy, medium, and hard categories. So it would mostly belong to the easy category. You won't have any tough questions being asked in these kinds of interviews. However, if you are applying to an AI kind of role, and let's say in a company like Microsoft, which also comes for this ML engineer role. I don't know if that is the case today, but it was there during our internship season. So if you are applying in those kind of companies, they would place more emphasis on DSA as compared to something like MX. But overall, I would say that it's definitely not as rigorous as is in SD roles. But I still wouldn't say that you shouldn't practice. You should be thorough. And again, both the points that Govind and Yashwanth mentioned earlier, you should keep those in mind. Can you just give me a couple of minutes?
Yeah,
I'm
sure, sure,
really sorry.
sure, sure, sure.
Yeah, so in at least when it comes to more traditional software roles, you will be asked like medium to hard questions in the test and slightly easier in the interview, because in the interview you have to do not only solve it but also to explain it. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry everyone for that. Yeah, so as Yashwant was mentioning just now, that for SG roles, it's generally the more tougher questions that you will come up during your interviews. But in analytics, I would say it's mostly much closer to medium, even if it will be there. That mostly depends on the company and the exact kind of role you are applying for. So that it's a good idea generally to get in touch with the seniors who are part of that firm and get an idea as to what kind of questions you can expect in the test. But overall, I would say that you should definitely practice DSA in general if you are applying for any field that requires any sort of coding. Apart from that, for analytics specifically, uh, the aptitude part of it is also something that you should take care of. So basic maths, for example, probability, combinatorics, the kind of questions that get asked in aptitude tests, those are also emphasized. And puzzles, that is something that analytics companies do love. They do love to ask these puzzle kind of questions that you can find on Geeks for Geeks. So that is also something that you should be prepared for going into this kind of role. And another thing that I would like to mention, which is kind of separate from all the technical stuff, is that a lot of times, uh, especially when it comes to tech roles, I've seen people being sort of overwhelmed and being underconfident that maybe I don't have the required projects on my resume या उतना skill set नहीं है that I can get into these roles. So on that, I would just like to point out that you need not feel underconfident in these kinds of situations, because for a lot of times, especially in analytics, companies are not looking at you having an extremely deep understanding of the subject. They are more into how your understanding is of all these things, like the aptitude part and the coding part, if you are clear about it logically. So as long as that's there, you need not be very concerned about how the result is actually going to go. Yeah, that's it for us.
Okay, so about the resume, if you don't mind me interjecting. So
Sure.
see, I would say that the evaluation process is not so, doesn't consider your resume so, doesn't weight by that much. But when choosing teams, right? So after you get through the evaluation process, in many companies, I think they look at your resume to assign you a team, and having better projects will might help you there. You might get a something that see that even once you get into a company, the kind of team that you get into also matters, because that will determine what kind of work you'll do for the next few years. And you don't want to be stuck doing something that is outdated, or something that is doesn't generate as much revenue for the company. Maybe you're developing some internal tools that the company itself uses, as opposed to, let's say, selling products to a customer. Yeah. So don't worry too much about that right now, but if you can, fix your resume, uh, yeah, please go ahead and do that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And by the
that
way,
was.
yeah, I did not do a lot of CS courses despite being in CS department. Like, I did the bare minimum. We only had to do 3 out of 7 department electives. I think even so this rule was there up to our year, and I chose to do the bare minimum. So, and I'm just fine. Like, I'm doing great work. I'm in a great team. So it also matters how you present your work in your resume. Like, your resume has to be something you're proud of, and it has to be something that you put a lot of effort into. When you look at it, you should feel a sense of relief, satisfaction when it's done. So yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that was great to hear such in depth about all these things, and it was like great how you took all the examples, the influence of AI, the influence of hard coding, the difference between SDE roles and data science roles. So it was great to hear. So now let's move on to the language. So like basically again talking about the language thing. So people usually have something key like is specific, like they should do in this or they should do in this, what should be the basic structure, how they should master the libraries one after one, like if they're going to for the Python and if they're going for the data science, and like how to understand the topics in a structured way. So what are your comments about these things? So I will again give off to Govind Bhaiya for this.
Yeah, sure. So, as mentioned on the slide, I would always say pick one language. That can be anything. Multiple choices could be C++, Python, or maybe even Java. Like, I believe these languages will be available in the environment for most online assessments you give them. And their interviewers might also be familiar with them. So you have so many choices. But I'm between them, I would say the first years, take something different. But it's
Sorry
not
to
really.
interrupt, Bhaiya, but your voice is like somewhat not clear. Can you please repeat
Yeah,
it once?
yeah. Even I felt.
Yeah,
Hello. Just a minute. Is it better now?
yeah, it is.
Okay. So yeah, so what I was saying was that like, uh, I wouldn't say pick a certain language over the other. Just that C++, Python, or Java are common choices because they would be available in most companies' test environments, and your interviewers may also be familiar with them. Between them, I would say it's your choice. Whatever you're comfortable with, all languages are fairly equipped to handle any coding problems that you may be seeing. But what I would say, still make a choice and stick to that and get very proficient in using that. Knowing one language very well is far more useful than knowing two or three in a slightly weaker manner. And another thing is to know the know the libraries and other tools that come with your language. Like in the instance of say C++, you should be familiar, I would say, with tools like vectors, sets, maps, and the standard template library. This is a standard template library. This may not be covered in a standard CS 101 course. It varies year to year, but can make your life vastly easier in interviews and online assessments. And yeah, that's mainly what I would say on this particular language topic. Not much to add there. Any opinion, Yashwanth, Vinayak, please tell.
Yeah, about mastery, right? You see, I can give you the example of C++. C++ has, if you want to do binary search, it has upper bound and lower bound. And these, just as an example, these functions take, you can pass a custom comparator into these functions. As in, by default, like if you wanted to do binary search, you would expect to perform that binary search on an array that is sorted ascending. But if you happen to have an array that's sorted descending, like you can kind of customize these functions to pass them a custom comparator and uh, uh, so that they work well on a descending array. Uh, or you could kind of do a gimmick where you kind of flip the array to begin with and then use the regular binary search functions. So like there is a lot of depth to STL, and I think even in Java. So you want to get familiar with all these tiny things about the language, and Geeks for Geeks is a great resource for this. I have found that it is any other website can make a mistake, but generally speaking, I don't think I have found a single mistake on GFG. So I'm not sure about Python. I'm not very used to it, but C++ and Java definitely have a lot of customization. Like, yeah.
Vinayak Bhaiya, any more add-ons to it?
I think both of you mostly covered everything. I would just say that yeah, the first point which is mentioned, that pick one language and stick to it. That is more important than anything else. You should not be switching between languages, because DSA as a topic is such a vast thing that if you in the midst of practicing, if you decide to now switch languages, you will have to spend a lot of time learning about the nuances of that languages and how to code different things in that language. And usually you don't really have that much time during your internship season. So the first point should be obviously to logically have an understanding of everything that's there in DSA, and after that just pick one language and practice in that how different types of topics can you solve using that language. So yeah, I would just, that is the only point I would like to mention.
Okay, so again, it was great to hear all this. Like, basically, the main keynote to take is key, like, you must stick to one and then, like, move on with the libraries and then make the changes, whatever you want to, and then get some deep understanding for the field. Okay, so now let's move on to the DSA, essential DSA topics. Like, as you might be aware, ki the attendees or the students are like being going to attend the intern season, they are going to enter it. So, like, basically, it will be the time for revising all this stuff, and even like we have to do it in a structured way. And I have mentioned all the like essential topics, so I just want key what they should do in that reference. So, we may start with you, Vinayak.
So I think most of the topics here are uh, mostly they cover everything that's it's quite exhaustive. Now as far as companies are concerned, from what I've noticed is that dynamic programming and arrays are and strings are some of the topics that they generally do focus on. Like DP is one of the topics which, if once you master it, that will get you through a lot of coding tests and interviews. Graphs are also something which some companies do focus on, but I would say that from my experience, I definitely think that this is somewhere where Govind and Yashwanth can add a lot more than I can. But for the most part, I would say that dynamic programming, arrays, and strings, these are three things that you should be focusing on. And I also quite like the way the slide is structured. You should always start with the foundational topics, array strings, because ultimately you will end up using them in while solving DP and graphs. So always have that understanding of all the foundational topics first. Don't directly jump to DP and graphs because you will not be able to solve it if you do that. So go in a structured way, follow the hierarchy that is mentioned here, and yeah, that's it from me.
So, like, any add-on session there? And even I want to ask, like, are there any such specific things like he mentioned, if you do the dynamic programming and arrays, so most of the companies focus on these. So, are there like any specifications, like particularly talking about Google, that these are the topics they target upon, and like just a basic overview, is that a thing for the companies?
Yeah, so about that, it might be true that some companies have a specific taste in problems, but like if you were to, you can't see when you're in the internship season, you're not aiming for just one particular company. What happens is you give interview after interview after interview, and then you get kind of better and better and better. And that is how people switch jobs also. You don't usually land the first interview that you give. So you kind of like you should have a more general strategy for preparing. So if there is a one particular company that asks a lot of graph questions, it's not like one day before the interview you can just sit down and do everything. But I will say that is true. Some companies have a specific taste. I think Uber asks a lot of graph questions. That should be kind of you should you should be able to see why they might want to do that, because Uber is all about moving in graphs, right? Um yeah, and yeah. I will also agree that you should do the foundational data structures first before you do the other ones. And when you are learning a data structure, you should do several problems in it. Like go deep into it, and maybe sort of 10 problems. Interview bit has this really nice UI where it kind of splits even array questions. It has like array related to sorting, array related to binary search, or like it splits them into subcategories. So I used to do one of each in interview bit. So you do that, that's great for each data structure. But every once in a while, you look at a problem and you should not know before looking at it which data structure to use. Like if you just do array problems, 10 of them, you will know that even before going into the problem, you know that you have to use an array. But that is not, again, representative of the kind of scenario you will be in a test or in an interview. In an interview, you'll just be given a problem, and it's you and your logic and your relationship with your thoughts and what the interviewer is telling you. Like these are the only things you have. You don't have um any hint as to which data structure to use. So, and that makes the problem twice or thrice as difficult, right? Um, yeah.
So let's conclude it with Govind.
Yeah, I mean, I guess most of the points there were covered. Like, even I agree that you need to start with, the foundational topics and move on to the stronger ones. Like, some of the hard problems that are actually seen in these uh, tests or interviews could be when these foundational topics are combined with these topics like graphs or DPs, right? When you have to use two of these together or something, is probably where the harder problems originate from. So getting a good understanding of when to use what is quite important. And yeah, and I also agree that from company to company, there may be certain preferences, but from a preparation point of view, you do need to cover everything in a broad sense and also get a solid understanding of whatever you're covering. Like knowing lesser in a deep manner is probably more useful than knowing everything in a very shallow manner. Uh, but that said, don't skimp on coverage. Do ensure that you cover everything you're working on. But yeah. I guess since most of the points were already covered, so not much else from me.
Okay, so yeah, that was a great information, and I hope like all the attendees might have gotten the point that how they should start with the basic foundations and then fuse in the topics and then just be get better in it. And even by the interview processes, they learn a lot of things from it. So yeah, it was great. Now let's again like move down to the key topics of breakdown, like in specific. So if any other like a short overview or something like that. You may start with Govind.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, as called out in the slide, like certain algorithmic techniques like two-pointer sliding windows, binary search on answers, knowing internals of how quick sorts and merge sort work. Lots of problems can be constructed around these. So they may not show up in a particular track of problems or anything, but these are algorithmic techniques that you pick up while solving, and I would say should be something that you are comfortable with by the time you're giving tests or interviews. Uh, Apart from that, complexity analysis is something that can give you hints during OAs and is very important during actual interviews. Uh, in test, by looking at the constraints, you may be able to get some hint on, okay, this is an n log. This problem may accept an O of n or an n log n solution, whereas this one may be okay with an n square solution. And also knowing these complexities of your standard algorithms, right? Will give you hints on key looking at the constraints. Okay, is this something that is acceptable here or not? In interviews, it takes even more importance because the interviewers almost certainly will drill you on the complex space and time complexity of the algorithms you're working with. And it also helps in your building from a slightly inefficient solution to a more efficient one. Uh, Apart from that, I think most of the stuff were yeah. On graphs. On graphs, I would like to say that BFS, DFS, Dijkstra's algorithm are as listed on the slides are like built a lot in problems and interviews. So there are other graph concepts that are important, but these take the cake in that sense. They're like far more have a far wider coverage, and understanding them internally in a good manner will open up a lot of the other graph concepts to you. Like, mm, yeah, I guess that's mainly it, as most of the topics were covered in the previous slide. This just expands on it. Uh, yeah, that's it from me. Vinayak or Yashwanth.
Yeah, I would like if they have any like spatial emphasis on some like specific topic or something, so just share that info. Else we have discussed about this in the previous side too, so just agree.
Okay, I'll just add one little thing. In my experience, I feel like there are only maybe 15 to 20 patterns that any interview problem, any DSA problem will fit. So it's either like two pointers, or it's like sliding window, or it is DFS, BFS, Dijkstra, and binary search. There's like one thing where one pointer moves at twice the speed of another, and it loops around, and you can find the circumference of a circle like that. So most problems that you will face fit into 15 or 20 patterns, and this number is very small. 15 or 20 is quite small. And eventually what should happen if you prepare and prepare and prepare is that when you look at a problem, you will just have an intuition of what might work, and you kind of try it out and you see, it works. It's not really like you're inventing anything new. So that's how it felt for me. And I will add the link of a good video that I found, that I felt is very much accurate. Where is the chat? Okay, I'll add it in some time. That's fine.
Any such add-ons, Vinayak?
I think for the most part, everything was covered during the last slide as well as this slide. I'll just say that, and I think this is also something that Yashwanth mentioned earlier, is that you should definitely practice the topics that I mentioned. I think mostly this is a quite exhaustive list of what are the key topics, and post practicing each topic, you should also have that sense of which, after looking at the problem statement, that which of these topics does it belong to, because that is not something that is will be mentioned in your lead code assignment, that this is a part of greedy algorithm or this is a part of BFS or DFS, but that won't be mentioned during your actual exam. So that is another part of the practice that I think you should definitely focus on after having done with all of these foundational as well as advanced topics. So apart from that, I don't have anything to add on.
Okay, thank you for the specific information regarding the key topics. Okay, so now coming to the main point, even as Vinayak Bhai earlier stated about some of the practical resources that a person must undergo. So let's start off with Vinayak Bhaiya, about all the resources which he personally used and what he thinks he like would prove the most practical, like the practical results at the very point, and considering key there is just a span of 1 month around the corner. So yeah, over to you, Vinayak Bhaiya.
Yeah, so considering from an analytics perspective, I will talk about both the aspects of it, the coding part as well as the aptitude part. So for the coding part, I think I have always found that GFG is the go-to for me. Although lead code is a good uh, website to have for practice, but overall, if you're preparing from an interview perspective, I don't think that there is anything that tops GFG. That is something that overall prepares you the best for any interview. So yeah, that's it for aptitude. I wouldn't say that I stuck to any particular website as such, but one really good thing that I found was that if you look at some of these actual aptitude tests that happen, so for example, CAT or GMAT or other exams such as this, practicing questions from those tests gives you quite a good idea of what to expect during placement test, because generally the questions that would pop up in company tests or interviews would be definitely at least a level lower, sometimes even more than what you see in these actual competitive exams. So if you have a good practice of those tests, it is usually a guarantee that you will be able to solve whatever questions come in the interview, in the internship or placement test, and even during the interviews. Um, and yeah, the time part is definitely something that I would stress on here, is that while the understanding part of both the coding and aptitude are important, and that is definitely something that you should be focusing on in your earlier days, as you move closer to the actual test day or the actual internship season where the tests begin to happen, you should definitely be sitting down and simulating time tests and interviews, because many a times uh, this is something that has happened with me personally in a lot of coding tests, where there are three problems and I get stuck on the first problem because I'm not able to figure out which topic it belongs to, or maybe once I have figured that out, I'm not able to optimize the code as much as they probably want me to. And that is something that you should definitely be practicing a lot. And in aptitude tests as well, uh, that analytics companies would ask, you would probably be pressed for time a lot. So for example, you'll have 30 minutes and you'll have to answer some, what, like 15-20 questions. So it's like a minute or two per question, and the questions are not as simple and straightforward that you would be able to solve it in a minute. So you have to be able to strategize, and you have to be able to select which questions you want to solve. Sometimes it's just better to skip a question and then come back to it. And this is something that I cannot stress enough, especially for the aptitude part. Many times you'll have a probability question or any question related to these topics, which you'll get stuck on, maybe because it involves a lot of calculation or it involves doing a lot of recursive steps, and that is not a good thing to do. Whenever you see that you're getting stuck in a loop or the question is taking a lot more time than it probably should, you should just skip it and go on to the next question, and then come back to the other to that question later. And I would say that that would probably be true even for coding, but not as much, because generally you will only have 2 to 3 questions. So yeah, I think that's it from my side.
Okay, that was informative. Like coming to Yashwanth Bhaiya, as they even earlier mentioned about some of the resources in the YouTube channels, like the Striper and all. So can you just elaborate on these things and like club up all at once and like just let our attendees to know about these things?
Okay, so I can't tell you about something I didn't use, but I will share the resources that I've used and found most helpful. I used a website called InterviewBit, www.interviewbit.com. Actually, I'll just write these in chat. I don't think I'll write the couple of resources that I used in chat. But apart from that, I would say that yeah, there is one extra thing that I feel you need to do during your preparation. So every once in a while, right, or maybe every time, I used to do it every time. Any problem that I would solve, I would kind of talk to an imaginary interviewer about it. And like I would, I would start off with a very brute force solution, and then I would optimize it, and then I would optimize it. And I'd really try to put myself in that frame of mind where you're in an interview and you're under time pressure and you have to both explain and solve at the same time. The reason I'm stressing that you need to do this maybe every time you solve a problem is because you can't like see the gap between your test shortlist, sorry, your interview shortlist and the interview is very short. You can't really prepare anything in that time. So everything that you do, it has to be a continuous process. So maybe once in every 3-4 problems, you go aside, maybe stand in front of a mirror, but try to talk it out with yourself, and you will see that you will get better. And there are a lot of decisions that you need to make while you're talking. Like you need to, turn it down if you're talking too much. Maybe talk a little bit more, and maybe record yourself if you need to. Uh, just yeah, I'm a very talkative guy, so as you might have noticed, but uh, I don't know why I brought that up. Anyway, so there's one last thing I will add. So with regards to Google in particular, Google has a very tough interview format. So basically all you have is a document that you write on. You don't have any code syntax highlighting. You don't have any auto formatting tools that kind of tab your code appropriately. All that is fine. Like it's not really an issue, but uh, you can practice in that format if you want to, because like it is the most bare bones thing that you will face. Like if for example, for example, like if you solve a problem in HackerRank, you get autocomplete, right? You kind of write a function, it tells you the whole name of the function. But in the Google interview, you don't have that. So you kind of like have to just ask the interviewer, hey, I think that C++ has a function that does something like this. I'm just going to call it ABC. That might not be the real name, but I'm going to call it ABC anyway, and I'm going to write it as ABC. And then the interviewer says, fine, yeah, that seems like a very reasonable function that C++ would provide you. You don't need to implement that yourself. Just assume that it exists, use it. So this is just one little specialty about the Google interview. It's not difficult as such, but it does require some extra communication. And one thing that I like a lot about InterviewBit is sometimes interview bit, like the problems intentionally don't have all the information provided to you. Like it won't tell you the size of the array that you're working with, because yeah, you're kind of just expected to make it work irrespective of how big it is. uh, and even the actual interviews that you'll be facing, some of the times, the interviewer will hold back some of the information and will expect you to get the question clarified. As in, the question will be vague to begin with, and you'll have to ask him questions. Hey, this is not clear. Can you tell me exactly what size of the array that it is we are working with? Because if the array is large, maybe I'll use this one algorithm. If it's small, I'll use another. Uh, this is definitely true in the Google interview, but maybe if your interviewer is using HackerRank, you might have all the information provided to you right off the get-go. But the reason that the interview process might be testing this is because they want to know if you will be a good fit in the team, right? If you will be a pleasant person to work with, who can kind of deal with these incompleteness of information, and go ahead and know whom to ask, what to ask, what not to ask, etc. So they're testing you on a lot of things in the interview, and almost I think about 1/3 of your interview marks will be this. 2/3 will be whether or not you get the problem, but 1/3 will be all the other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That was great to hear, like the way you connected it with your personal experiences, like the way you used to uh like attend the interview on your own basis, and the way you told us about the Google interviews and everything. That was such an insightful information. Govind, do you have any add-ons on this? So yeah, good to go.
Yeah, sure. So as the topic of interviews is brought up, right? I concur with Yashwanth on one thing, that you definitely need to practice thinking out loud, right? In interviews, it's important to keep communicating. Like you don't need a long silent patches in an interview. It is a two-way street. Be brave to ask questions, get things clarified, right? And always don't jump to implementing yet. Like give a give a purpose, probably a brute force solution, or maybe a slightly more efficient one. Communicate the idea with the interviewer. Get get an okay from the interviewer on the solution key. Okay, this sounds good, and then jump into the coding part. Like, and again, the uh, regarding not having IDs and libraries, I agree with that. Like in my Rubrik interview, it was even worse. I had to code on paper. Like it was an actual physical paper that we had to write on, not no computer itself. So yeah, it can get yeah, and yeah. And one thing that's mentioned on the slide that I would say is important is we get in exams and while practicing, don't rely on submitting your test and seeing oh, this is wrong, and then trying again to debug. Actually, learn to think through, walk through your code, or do dry debugging in your head, or be able to come up with test cases that you can use to validate or disprove your solutions. Because in an interview, you will not have actual, they will not give you test cases, or they may give you one sample, but the onus is on you to mostly come up with these things, right? So do work on trying to validate your solution's correctness, and only when you're fully confident, actually submit it on platforms. Don't rely on the platforms checker to say, hey, something's wrong, go back and fix it. uh, Apart from that, yeah, I think that's majorly it on this.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So
yeah,
I will like to
go for
emphasize.
it.
Yeah, I will like to emphasize that this difficult format is not common to many companies. Only a few companies probably use it. So you can just I mean, it depends on what you're going for. So don't stress it too much if you didn't understand what we said, or maybe it seems too difficult. So you can do what works for you. That's fine.
Okay, thank you for the detailed answers. Now let's move forward. And let's come to the main point, like the resume building parts. So, like how, like basically you might have done the project. So how to showcase those projects in the resume, how to tailor out the things, and like some basic resume tips being from like such high tech firms. So yeah, I would love to start with you, Govind.
All right. So for these internships, right, I would say the main factor that actually plays in is your tests and the interviews. The resumes, in a way, are secondary. Like I'm not saying they're not important, but your tests and interviews are actually far more deterministic of how they would see you in the hiring process. Like resumes actually come at a later stage if there is a tie breaking or something that they need to do, or in team matching, as Yashwanth mentioned earlier. That said, resumes still are important, so don't gloss over them. So as for tailoring them for SDE, as most tech firms, if I'm not wrong, ask for two-page resumes, not one page. So you would need good two-page resumes, and basically, I personally had just put most of the projects that I had worked on during my time at college, be it course projects or something I did for a tech team, or something else. Like basically listing out what you did it with, like what were the outcomes that you got out of it, or what tools or something that may have been used there were the main things that went into my resume. Uh, yeah, like that's not much coming to mind right now for resumes, so I'll let the others take on. But if there's anything, I'll add in later.
Sure. Moving on to Yashwant.
Yeah. So you guys are just finished your second year, so you might not be able to fill your resume. To be honest, if I remember correctly, when that was the case for me, unless you're very very exceptional and have done many courses that have a lot of projects and stuff. So just put your best stuff on top. And since this is the first time you're making your resume, it will be extra difficult because you'll have to find, like, you'll have to actually write it and stuff. In during subsequent iterations of your resume, you'll just be editing it. um yeah, that's it.
Let's conclude it with Vinayak.
Yeah, so for analytics and ML, I'll definitely say that it's slightly different because companies do focus a lot more on your resume as compared to dev roles where the tests play a much more significant role. So here I would say that it's not so much about how you build your resume, but it's more about how well prepared you are with your resume when you go into your interview. So what I mean by that is that you should be extremely thorough with whatever you have written in your resume. So, for example, in an ML role, you have written something like a deep learning project. You have written it at the top because you maybe think that it was the most intellectually challenging and complicated project that you worked on. So, you should be very well prepared with how exactly you went about with each project, because many a times you will go into ML related interviews and the interviewer is going to pick one project that, hey, you worked on, let's say, just an image recognition project, right? They'll start off with what was the problem statement, what was the data that you exactly worked on, what were the challenges that were associated with that particular data set, and how did you then go about solving the problem. And that is something that you should be definitely be very clear on, is that how you went about solving each problem in that project. And apart from that, you should also be aware of whatever nuances that there are related to the models that you use, because many a times the interviewer, while you are describing your approach, might have counter questions that, hey, this model has, let's say, some X shortcoming. So how have you used that in this project? And that is something that you should be able to justify. So for ML roles, I'll definitely say that prepare your resume very well. The exact projects that you put in your resume and the order in which you write those resumes does not really matter all that much, but you should be thoroughly prepared to answer any questions that the interviewer might pick from your resume. That's it.
Okay, so like thank you for the clarity regarding entire resume, like about the order, about the project which you are doing, about the field which you are targeting. It was pretty clear, but I just want to emphasize the point one of being the open contribution, like open source contributions. So Govind, bhaiya, like have you got anything to say about these things? Like, do they actually matter in this upcoming era, or like self projects, or like what will be the priority?
If you have any open source contributions to any major repos, or if you have something that you have you wrote, it's definitely good. It's definitely something that can be shown on your resume. But whether that like you're being considered for intern positions, so that's not very expected per se. It's a good to have, but not a requirement, I would say. And what would matter more is what you have actually done in those contributions than whether you have them or not. Like a more involved course project you may have done might be more useful than a small open source feature you may have added. Uh, because and that is in line with what I had said earlier, that resumes are not that important for tech rounds. Like it majorly comes up in hiring manager rounds, or in their background screening, where they themselves are comparing resumes to shortlist. Uh, yeah. So in summary, good to have, not necessary. But if you have it, you can definitely put there.
Thank you for the detailed answer. I would just ask on for some add-ons from Yashwanth or Vinayak bhaiya, like if there are any, or should we move on?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Thank you.
Yeah, same. Not
Okay,
anything from my side.
okay, sure. Okay, so now coming to the interview process. So firstly, I would start off with ki what was your personal interview experience? Like what was the basic structure? Like firstly, they asked you to do this, then the aptitude, or like what was the entire process of it? And even like some like breakdowns which you faced during the interview process. Or as Yashwant Bhaiya mentioned, ki you keep on giving interviews multiple times and then you learn back from these things. So what are the things you learned from it? And like what were the things? So basically, let's start off with Yashwant Bhaiya, being that the case.
Um, okay. Interviews, you see, an interview is quite similar to a test. It's not that much different. There are just a couple of extra parameters that you will be tested on. So it's not an entirely foreign experience. But one thing that, like one defining principle that should outline the way you behave during your interviews, you want to put up a persona that you are someone that people would want to work with. So someone who, even if they don't know the answer, even if they can't, strictly speaking, solve it by themselves, maybe you take a hint and you solve the problem entirely. And you're very good with your communication. So you don't talk too much. You're not annoying, but you talk facts and what you know, what you don't know, and you and sometimes it's okay to take a long pause also. Like you can tell the interviewer that, you know what, give me 5 minutes of time. I will do some rough work and I'll get back to you on this. And that's completely fine. So just be comfortable in the interview. Try to, yeah, try to be a good potential teammate. That's what I'd say. And don't be afraid of taking hints. I took 2 hints in one question uh, during my Google interview. It was, I don't know, it was a very weird question. It had to do with points on a plane, and I had never seen anything like it. I kind of had a vague idea, but I took 2 hints, and finally I was able to do it. I like, of course, taking hints is not always a good thing, but it is what it is. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so basically taking up the keynote as like maintain it as a collaborative session, like both of you are engaged in the process. And like following this, like I would ask upon Govind Bhaiya regarding this. And even I would ask upon key, like what were the soft skills that helped you in the process? And like what there might be some things which you personally felt key students like might overlook these things while preparing for internship season. So what are the things they must take care of, and what are the things they must be aware about on the final day execution? So yeah.
Okay. So on interview days, I agree with some of the points that were brought up earlier that we do need to keep communicating, and taking a pause is definitely a fine. But even if you're stuck, right, I would say open up to the interviewer and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. You don't want to be in a situation where, okay, the interviewer gives you a problem and for 20 minutes you're sitting at the paper and looking for something, right? And also similar to what Yashwanth said, taking a hint and solving it is far better than not solving it at all, right? So, and coming to the questions that Vaibhav had just brought up, my interview process mainly had, like, I think Rubrik had two technical rounds. One with the graphs on DP, and another one was just a simple array DP question. And there was also the non-technical round with the hiring manager. Uh, and uh, and the soft skills that do come in here are majorly being a good communicator, being candid, like don't bluff, don't try to make something seem like what it's not there. Like if you're stuck, say it. If whatever's running in your mind, be clear about that. Be transparent, and yeah. And something that people do tend to overlook on interview days is just how packed it is, right? You would hear there may be like on weekends where you have interviews, there may be multiple companies back to back, and you may be mentally drained. Like just take those 2 minutes between interviews to calm yourself down again before heading in for the next one. And yeah, anything I missed, Weber, in the questions you asked?
Yeah, it would work perfectly. That was clear.
Yeah. All right.
Moving to Vinayak Bhaiya. To be specific, I just want to know from your end, like how was it different from that of a pure software engineering role, like being from a data analyst side? So what was the differentiating factor and the similar questions which I asked them, like the complete flow of your interview and any such breakdowns if you faced any?
Yeah, so my interview was basically conducted in two rounds, and both of them were sort of a mix of technical as well as HR based questions. I would say specifically on the HR based questions, most companies would stick to very standard 5 6 questions, that what are your strengths, or how, where do you see yourself in 5 years. These are the standard questions that they ask in HR rounds. If you have a dedicated HR round, or if they are mixing it up, these questions you'll definitely encounter in an interview. So that is, I think that there was some a handbook of some 64 or 65 common HR questions that are asked. I'm not sure. I'll try and find it. If I have it, I can share it post this call as well. Um, I would definitely say that that is something that you should be prepared with going into an interview. Like that is definitely not a part of the interview that you should miss, and it's very easy to miss that part because you are getting wrapped up in all the technical aspects of it. From the technical part, in ML interviews, you might be given some very open-ended questions. So the interviewer might just ask that, for example, in the context of American Express, right? That create an ML model to detect whether a credit card has been swiped and is that a fraudulent transaction or not. And you have to create an ML model for that. So that's a very open-ended problem, and that is the part where the engaging with the interviewer becomes even more important, and that is the part where you should really think about the interview being more as a conversation rather than as a just a question and answer. You should be engaging with the interviewer. You should be asking them that, okay, this is the approach that I'm thinking of. And especially in ML, because you'll when you are building models, you have to ask the interviewer that what is the information that is available to me. I'm thinking that, okay, maybe this variable is something that might be correlated with a fraud happening. Is this information available to us? That is something that you should definitely clarify with the interviewer, that what is the data that is present, what is it exactly that you're working with. Because when you are given such an open-ended problem, it's if you actually somehow come up with a solution without asking any clarifying questions, that is more of a red flag than asking questions. That this person does not even have the complete context and still they were able to come up with a solution. That should not have been possible. So sometimes the interviewer actually expects you to ask counter questions, and I would say that that is not something that you will be able to gauge in an interview. So in general, good practice is to, if you have a question related to the problem statement, it's better to just ask it. Nobody is going to be judging you on that, because more often than not, the interviewers are just looking at the approach that you are taking, not at the final outcome. Because in analytics interviews, especially, there is no right or wrong answer. They are just looking at how you are going to be approaching a problem statement. And yeah, I think that's mostly it from my.
One small thing I'd like to add, just a warning, like when you go into an interview, you don't the interviewer might not be so receptive to everything you say, or they might not seem like that. Sometimes they're doing something on the side, and maybe they had a busy day at work. They're not really interested in taking the interview, but they have to do it anyway. So just don't be thrown off by that. Try your best. Given, like, generally speaking, your probability of getting in doesn't depend on any of those factors. Like the interviewers, they listen with one ear, but that's usually sufficient.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I would also second, because that is something that I experienced during my interview as well. Is that in the first round, my interviewer was extremely welcoming, and he warmed up to me extremely quickly, and I felt very comfortable during my first round. And once my round ended, I was quite sure that I had made it through to the second round, just based on the interaction I had with my interview. But during the second round, it was very evident that my interviewer had a long day at the office, and something clearly did not go well for them that day, and they were extremely irritated. So, and sometimes it's very easy to become nervous in that kind of a situation, and it's also okay to be nervous, but you don't want that to be extremely evident on your face. So just try to be cool, because the interviewer is also a person. They can also be going through something, and it's perfectly normal for them as well to be irritated if their day has been long. Just, yeah, that is something that you should keep in mind as well.
Okay, so like thank you so much like for the personal insights and your the things which even you face in your interviews. That was such a great information. Now I would like to just place a general question from my end. Like, was there a time when you felt hopeless, like the things are not going on how they were supposed to go? And if so, like how did you overcome that feeling? As even you might be aware that this time plays a very crucial role, like it's been on edge of 1 month. So like was there any such moments in yours too? So we may start off with Vinayak Bhaiya.
That's a very interesting question. And to be honest, this was something that I felt every day. At some point of the day, I would feel hopeless that इस बार तो पता नहीं हो नहीं रहा कुछ. And I would say that that is fairly normal, because you will see people around you, maybe your friends are getting interview call ups and you are not getting it, and you start to question that what has been missing in your interview, in your preparation strategy, if something has gone wrong. One thing that I would definitely mention here is that, since all of us come from a background of that, we have given JE and we have come to this college, right? And JE is a much more objective exam, and it's a much more objective process of selection, whereas your internships and placements are always going to be a lot more subjective. It's not as objective that इतने marks आ गए उससे इतना rank आ गया and so I'm getting selected into this college and this branch. It's never going to be that black and white in your interview process, so in your placement or internship process. Sometimes when you are giving an interview, your interviewer might have some personal preferences that might get in the way of your selection, and that is something that you can not really control. So there are a lot more things that you cannot control during your internship and placement season, and that is completely fine. So you should not be really stressing out a lot that maybe you gave an interview and you felt that यार ये तो हो जाना चाहिए था, but somehow it didn't happen. Uh, that happens to everyone. A lot of time people feel confident that they'll be able to crack an interview, and then they end up getting disappointed at the result. I think ultimately, if you are putting in that effort, and if you are again focusing on the basics, you have prepared your resume well, and you are confident in your interview, ultimately you will be able to land an internship. I don't think that is going to be that much of an issue. But I just keep that in mind that this process is a lot more subjective as compared to the objective process that we are used to during JE, and even during tests, the exams that we give in college. So it's a different process, and you should be able to accept that ultimately. That's it from me.
Okay, so moving on to Govind Bhaiya, any such experiences you faced?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's something that I'm sure everyone would have faced at some point in their lives, not specific to internship season. So yeah, I would say what definitely keeps me going in such times is believing in yourself. ठीक है, whatever is there, I have done what I could, and there are certain things beyond my control. Like the interviews are a subjective process at the end of the day, as Vinayak mentioned. The company may be looking for a certain something, or you may have had a bad day on that day. That is not a reflection of you as an individual or your capabilities, right? It is still something fairly very early in life, and not something to feel down on. Like once, what's important is to just keep believing in yourself. Ki, "ठीक है, I can do stuff," and just giving your best in every interview and or test you may be giving it. Like there may be others who have gotten their selections yet, and yours may not have happened yet. What's important is to just, just keep going at as you are putting in your efforts, and you will eventually get what you want.
Okay, great. Concluding it with Yashwanth Bhaiya. Sorry to say, but Bhaiya, your mic, yeah, like muted.
Yeah, sorry. There was one specific moment where I felt like that. So I was sick, and I had a ton of tests to write that day, and it was that a company called Optiver, and it has a very long test. I mean, I don't know what they're testing in that, but like they make you play games and stuff. It's very weird test. Um, so what I did was I just left. I left the test in between because I couldn't take it anymore, and I don't tolerate that feeling for very long. That's just me. I'm not saying that you should do such things, but I kind of like in the beginning I was very naive and optimistic, and I thought, well, I can give every test. I'll give all the tests. I'll do very well on all of them. But eventually, I kind of figured, okay, this quant thing is not really working for me. And to be honest, I was never even really sure of whether or not I should try, prepare, and give those tests because I don't like the kind of job that lies ahead. Uh, so I eventually made the decision that I would not prepare. Maybe I'd give some contests, but I wouldn't prepare for it. So I kind of just gave up on some part of it, and I chose to focus on just the software side.
Okay, so like that was a bit weird. Like people like you even have faced such moments, so that might be a motivating thing for the attendees too. Like everyone has that feeling once in their lifetime. And lastly, before moving into the Q&A session, to be very specific, I would love to ask you the much awaited question that almost everyone in this meet wants to know. How can one convert an internship into a PPO? And we all seek guidance from you all regarding this. So let's start off with Govind.
Okay, so once you're in an internship, you're actually assigned to different teams, and you're working as a part of that team for your in their day-to-day work. And in many companies, the work you're given is quite meaningful and is actually needed for their business, or is something that is nice to have and they want to get done, just never got around to it. So I would say that few things to do here. To At the end of the day, what you want to do in an internship is to leave an impact. It could be via the project that you are assigned and doing it well. And what's also important is to keep coming up with your contributions, your views. Like, don't think, "Hey, I'm just an intern, I should be quiet." Learn to speak up, learn to bring out ideas, float it around with the other, be a part of their day-to-day team's functioning. Uh, and but at the end of the day, the main important thing that does come into picture is the project, the task itself you're assigned, getting that done well, and also in the end, in the minds of your peer, uh, like leaving behind a thought that hey, I want that guy back to, and I want to be working with him, sort of a situation.
Yeah, that was great to hear. Let's move on to Vinayak here.
Yeah, so again, I would mostly second what Govind said, and that one thing that definitely I would like to point out is that most of the projects that anyone would get assigned in their internship are more exploratory in nature. It's not the usual work that your team does. It's something that they want to explore, that we want to implement some new thing, and they have given that project to an intern, because usually in the full-time employees won't exactly be doing that. So in that, it's important to ask questions, because many a times during my interview I faced this, that my manager was someone who had been in the company for 7 or 8 years. So I thought कि भाई इसको तो सब पता ही होगा. So I should just follow whatever he's saying. But as I moved forward, I understood that the project that I was working on was extremely exploratory in nature, and nobody had worked on something like that before. And that is something that they are looking for from interns, that you bring forward fresh ideas based on what you have learned in your college so far. So don't be afraid to share your views on how you think you should move forward with the project. Sometimes your manager is going to give you a very bare bones framework of how he thinks that the project should be done, but you might know of some other tool or some other approach that has come up more recently that you are aware of, that you feel will be more impactful and a better or more optimized way of solving the problem. So yeah, just share that. It's at the end of the day, it's making an impression, right? That your manager should feel कि हाँ मतलब कुछ तो अलग करके गया है. And ultimately, as long as you are doing that, you are making that impression, uh, you will mostly be able to convert your PPO. And another thing that I would say in the end is that there are still things that will be beyond your control, like the market conditions. Sometimes and this was specifically something that happened in our batch, during our batch, that the market conditions were not good at all, and a lot of people who had worked extremely hard during their internship and had produced excellent results were still not able to convert their PPO, just because the company was not in a position to hire new people. And again, that is something that is beyond your control, and you should not be stressing over that. Ultimately, you should just go in and make a contribution, and for the most part, that should be enough to get you a PPO in most companies. That's
Okay, so let's wind this up with Yashwanth.
So see, when you uh, let's say when you're giving an interview, you have like a time limit. In 2 hours, you have to perform, and you're at your 100%. But when you're actually working a job, it's kind of like you're not at your 100% the whole time. So you kind of, it's like a longer drawn fight where you kind of have to give your 70%, 80% throughout the time, and you need to be consistent. So it's a different kind of thing, and people who do one thing well need not do the other thing well. So if you're a very good test taker, that doesn't mean you will be doing good on the job. But Yeah, and I completely agree with what the other two panelists said. You kind of have to leave an impact. Basically, the team should feel like they want you back, and you don't like. It's very good if you have that wow factor where your project says do ABC, but you went above and beyond, and you said, okay, why don't we try this? And you do something that is very, very innovative. That, that is amazing, but you don't always need to do that. Like it's probably enough if you do a diligent job, if you are regular, so you kind of reply to people's questions often enough. So just be a good employee, a good corporate employee. When you're just joining a company, you don't have a lot of say in many things, but over the scope of your project, you can make some modifications, and definitely find the right balance of questions to ask different people. So uh, don't ask your manager every single question that you have, kind of like distribute it over the team and find out who has an idea of which component and who is the best resource for what. So apart from that, uh, yeah, I can share with you my specific experience. I did have somewhat of a tough time in the first half of my internship. So what happened was they gave me a project that was supposed to be a starter project, supposed to be easy, and it was only supposed to take 3 weeks. But turns out nobody in my team had done anything like that before. On the face of it, it was a very simple task, but there was no documentation for it. The people who were familiar with it were abroad, and due to it required a lot of permissions, and the steps for doing it were not laid out clearly in any one place. So this was completely unexpected, and I ended up wasting a lot of time in the first half, and like often I, I was able to do my main project more easily than my starter project. So these kinds of things are not in your control. Um, in the end, you almost invariably, no matter which company you go to, you have a final presentation or a final review where you present your work to other people, and you get an opportunity to tell them what kind of problems you faced. So but be verbose, be clear with what happened, and often in tech companies there is a big approval process for everything, and one person cannot do everything. So yeah.
Okay, so thank you everyone. Like this would help all the attendees for it. And being that said, now let's move on to the Q&A session. And I would ask the attendees, like you're free to unmute yourself and to ask the doubts, or even you may drop down those doubts in the chat box or the Q&A box, and I will take them up one by one. So I have some questions in the chat box. So firstly is, if you had a year to prepare for your respective roles, what all would you focus on and how much time would you give it to them? So anyone who would like to share these things?
I
Like,
can take that
was it,
quickly.
yeah, like,
Yeah,
as
like
if ki, sure, go for it, go for it.
yeah, the question was if you had a year, what would you do, sort of a thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
so
what
I mean,
changes could be brought up at
hmm,
your like when stage of internship? So what could have been
okay.
changed?
So given such a long time frame, I probably would not like uh, so as Yashwanth had mentioned earlier, like these BSA kind of problems that they throw at you are at its core logic puzzles that you're using your brain to untangle. Right? So if it's something you enjoy puzzle solving and all that, I personally had spent quite a bit of time on platforms like Codeforces, giving contests just for the fun of it, not for learning interviews or anything like that. Just because I like the problem solving aspect of it and spent time there. So if you have more time, you can definitely, and if that's something that interests you, that's an angle you can explore. Apart from that, like getting ready for interviews is just one thing. You also have to be capable in equipped to actually work on develop an understanding for that field you're going into. So working on other projects, like doing stuff, doing the courses that may be relevant to the field, side projects, or anything else that may come up there, are something that can be picked if you have that kind of a time frame. I would still say anything focused specifically for internships, a year is quite a long time frame to do something specific for internships. You would rather just be doing stuff to enhance your profile as a whole, and of course, at the end of the day, having a good time in college as well.
Okay, I hope that might have answered that question. So coming to the next question, I guess this is linked with Yashwanth Bhaiya's resources which he asked for. So the person is asking, is Kunal Kushwaha DSA playlist nice to follow and like should he go for it? So if you are aware about this, anyone or maybe Yashwanth Bhaiya in specific. Okay,
I do not know actually that one.
okay, no issues. Uh, Nextly is like, can you rate down these roles like in points, like as if in your role being from a SDE or data analysis, how much points will you give to DSA? Like at like being considering it as a priority order, like the DSA project, self projects, some professional experience, some POR or some soft skill. So how would you rate those things, or how will you line them up in a table from top to bottom? So anyone who might be, go for it.
I mean, I think these are well established already. Like people always put their work experience on top, then they put their projects.
No,
I'm
sorry to interrupt, but I guess the way he has framed the question, he might have been asking like, what to be like, if a person like you give DSS 7 points out of 10. So basically, that would be key. It is a prioritized thing. So considering like that, what will be the priority order in that, like that?
actually I can't see the chat. Maybe someone who can see the chat can answer it. I posted some resources. They are visible, right?
Yeah, yeah, they are visible, but they are asking the questions on the Q&A. So I think that is not visible to you, I guess.
Yep, same with me.
Yes.
I don't see a chat window anymore. So
Yeah, even I can't see the chat window, but basically the question is that of all the various things that were mentioned during this the preparation strategy, is there is any prioritization or rank ordering that you would follow, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, on that I wouldn't say that there is any rank ordering as such. So for example, even if you have prepared on your DSA very well, but you're not preparing on your resume or your interview skills quite as well, that is going to end up costing you in your selection. So I wouldn't say that you should prioritize one thing over another. I would say in the initial days, obviously, you should be focusing more on building your concepts and practicing DSA or aptitude more. And as you get closer to the interview, you should try to give mock interviews and prepare with that mindset that what am I going to exactly say in an interview and how I'm going to exactly behave during the interview. But I wouldn't say that there is any rank ordering as such from my end. You should be able to give equal attention to every aspect of the process.
Okay, so that sounds great. Like you have to prioritize each and everything to be on the perfect thing. So yeah, moving on to the next one. So the person is asking about like some of the good coding practices that they must follow. Like as Yashwant Bhaiya mentioned, ki you should practice in writing a notepad so as you don't have the habit of writing all this syntax and all. So I guess that might be related to it, like any such good coding practices that might be followed, or like meaningful variable names while like the interviewer asks a question. So like kind of that. So if anyone want to take that up.
sure. So I would say making sure your code is fairly readable is a good thing. Like I would not say code on a notepad or something. Like that's just torturing yourself throughout the end. Like you can use an IDE. Like for most of your preparation, the aim is to get the DSA concepts in your head, getting yourself well equipped with it, right? You can definitely not use any massive predefined templates. Like some competitive programming sites have that. You can, start coding on your own. But having features like autocomplete and all that is fine. That is not something that is going to improve it very much. It will just slow you down and take cognitive points there. Uh, yeah, apart from that, for interviews, I would say just make sure your code is fairly readable. Like if there is some code being reused multiple times, put it in a function. Make your function names descriptive enough for an interviewer to understand and stuff like that. Like at the end of the day, they are testing your problem solving skills, and that is your core aspect. Being able to convey your ideas and your code sufficiently is sufficient is enough in my opinion.
Okay, thank you for the great response. Moving on to the next one. So this is being like as if I think this might be relevant for Vinayak here to be specific, being from a like non-circuital branches or like being focusing upon the like non-CS or branches. So how must they target for such data analysis or SDE roles to be specific? And is there any influence to be very like high influence over your branch as being from a mechanical engineering and going into non-core field? So have you felt any such thing like that to be specific?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously, at the beginning, you'll be facing some problems because you'll have to juggle between your core courses and preparing for something that is not connected as much with your departmental studies. But I would say that for the most part, the principles are the same, whether you're from a circuital branch or you're not from a circuital branch, is to build your concepts first, practice coding on these platforms like GFG, and uh, basically just reiterating and practicing more and more. And I think that is it. I wouldn't say that being from a non-circuital branch is a disadvantage as such. In that case, you'll definitely have to balance your academics with your internship preparation, since usually both of these are not going to be connected with each other. But and yeah, I think that is definitely something that you should keep in mind, is that your academics in the end are almost as important as the entire preparation process, because companies do look at your CPI when during the selection procedure, and sometimes it can be used as a tiebreaker. So don't neglect your academics uh, as part of the preparation procedure. So yeah, I'll just say that. For the non-secretarial branches, this is definitely something that I would say, that don't just throw away your academics and just focus on preparing for your internship. Try to balance both of them to the best of your ability.
Okay, that's great. Uh, Even the next question is for you, Vinayaka. The question is if someone has done the theory part of the ML and like data analysis, so like he's asking for some project ideas or how to select projects, like what is the complete thing?
Sorry, how to select projects? Is that the question?
Yeah, like
Um,
if he has done the theory part, then what
hmm,
on to start with at the very first point?
I would say that for your internship, you do not need to be looking at anything very glamorous. Just focus on your very simple and basic projects that might be available on Kaggle. And there are some like five or six very, I don't know what's the scene currently, but during our time it was something like stock market analysis was just a project that everyone would have on their resume. I would say that mostly course projects, that would be something that you should be focusing on if you have done any courses based on data science, and whatever projects you might have done as part of that. Apart from that, I would say SOC is something that uh, offers some really good projects. There is something known as WIDS, which is conducted by the Analytics Club. Those have very good projects. In the end, I would say that for your internship, the exact project does not matter as much. Uh, the models that you have used in your project and the approach that you have employed while solving that project is something that will be more important in your selection procedure rather than the exact project.
Yeah, okay. So I think that might have answered that question. Nextly, there is a similar question like how should a person like balance on the DSA, academics, and like such things all at once? So, any a brief answer over it?
Sorry, is that specifically for me or is that a general
No,
question for the?
yeah, it is just a general question, like anyone could answer. Like just a
Uh,
basic how you can balance all over the things.
Yeah, I mean, look, that is something that again is something that is very subjective to how you approach things. If and where you are when it comes to your internship preparation. If you are someone who has already done a lot of good projects in AIML or are very well prepared with DSA, then probably you can prioritize your academics a little bit more. But I would say that ultimately uh, you should create a daily timetable. I think that is probably it's a boring answer, but I think that is something that works. That create a daily timetable and allocate some time of your day when, and that's up to you. Maybe you feel that practicing your DSA or your aptitude during the night is something that you find good, and so you can allocate 3 hours or 4 hours at night to that, and the rest of the time you can focus on your academics. So that is something that I would say is very subjective to each one of us. But yeah, the basic overall strategy would be just to create a timetable and allocate time for your academics, for your internship uh, preparation, and also more importantly to rest and recharge in between. That is something that I think all of us overlook. And by the time the internship season actually arrives, we are so burnt down that uh, that is something that affects us negatively. So allocate time to each of these three parts: your internship process, your academics, and resting and recharging in between equally. Yeah, that would just be what I can say from my end.
So coming to the next question quickly. So this question is related for the SG roles. So the person is asking, is the concept of oops related is stuff asked in rubrics or Google interview to be specific? And if yes, then where to extract that information from?
Not so much. I would say like you should be able to know what a class is, understand what a class is, like write a class and stuff like that. But the actually needing to use them in problems is there. Like it's more of a know the basic, know what it is, but not something to be something to spend a lot of time on. Like nobody's asking you to write three levels of nested inheritance and stuff like that. But just understanding what it is, as it may come up as it's a basic CS concept, right? So it might come up here and there, but not something to focus too much on.
So
Okay, I guess.
you
Ah, Sure.
you don't tell, you show. You should show your understanding of oops in the way you write code. Like it should be modular. It should be, if let's say, I think it's not very common, but if you do have to define classes, like and there's like, maybe I'll give you an example. Maybe you're trying to emulate RAM and then ROM. So both of these classes can inherit from a parent class. I mean, it's just basic, evolution, right? So you kind of like show it through the way you write code. That's all I'll say. Generally speaking, it's not very common for them to ask you, and uh, it's very difficult to, like, it's much easier to show good understanding from the way you write code than from telling someone what something is.
Okay, that was insightful. Next question is again for Vinayak Bhaiya. Like the person is asking, like, is doing the data analysis courses provided by IBM and Google or from Coursera are really helpful in the process? And also, can you, if not, then can you even suggest some material or sources, even if it is not, or even if it is compatible enough for these kind of jobs?
So that depends if you are looking for sort of solidifying your theory surrounding ML. Then I would definitely say that it helps. But so is this more about mentioning these things on your resume, or is it for just preparing? I think that would, if that clarification can be made, that would be helpful. If you are
As far
talking
as I
about
can,
preparing for topics, then I would say that these courses can definitely help. But as far as putting things on your resume is concerned, I think you should definitely be looking at projects. And I am someone who has always believed in a more hands-on approach. So rather than going through the theory of it, I'll have the theory open side by side, and I'll also be working on just a very basic project related to that. Uh, on the other window, I'll have a Python notebook open where I'll be coding that model, and on the other side, I'll have the theory open, and I'll be trying to link both of them together, because ultimately, I think in ML, a lot of it comes down to that, and in general, I think in coding, that's what it comes down to, is that you need to be able to connect the logical theory aspect of it to the coding aspect of it. So I would say that balancing both of these things is probably a good way to go for.
so considering if the question is for preparing, then that are like some good resources, but then we have to fuse in with the more like actual like practical impressions over it. So yeah, that sounds feasible. Coming to a general question, like, is it necessary to get in like internship firstly, like through off campus, like through LinkedIn or something? As many of my friends have already gotten into interns, and now I'm facing FOMO or something like that. So is that something?
Is this question from a second year POV or a third year POV? Because third year, I think the process is pretty well done at InStream, as in you do have a very good set of companies coming in on campus, and that is that is a good way to go ahead. From a second year POV, I do see that some people may go off campus, but not sure if that's very relevant unless people are going for universities or something in third year.
Okay, great. And like coming to one of the last questions, like can you address specifically for the SDE roles as circuital branches get preference over the non-circuital ones, and that is pretty obvious. And sometimes even the roles are not open for such a job. But if you are dedicatedly interested towards that field, then what should that person try of like some any sort of curvy line to get to the same end point? So what should that person go through?
Look, I have no business answering this question, but I'm going to do it anyway. I think that if there's a person who knows his stuff, his or her stuff, and like he or she has projects and he or she has the skills, no one is not going to hire them. Like it's that's just the way it is. That's just corporate doesn't care about anything. It's just that maybe they get more signal to noise ratio when they take from CS and elec. But apart from that, I'm pretty sure like once you get through the test and once you sit in the interview and someone thinks you're worth giving a chance, so all the same rules apply to anyone. Have good projects, have clear communication, have good problem solving skills. The only thing is, if you're in CS in particular, you might get some course projects from your core courses, but yeah, that might be the only advantage, and maybe during the shortlists you might have an advantage. But
Yeah, and I'd like to add that there may be some companies that are restrictive to certain departments in the intern process, like they're not even open for non-circuital. Those are rare, but they do exist, and I would say that is mainly for companies just optimizing the number of candidates they may have to test or interview for. Right? They're like Yashwanth mentioned, this SNR is better in these cases. So ideally what someone in that scenario can do is get into the career line that they want, and later in their career they can nobody is stopping them from moving over to a better company that may have been close to them during the internship season, because at the end of the day, the interns are still very very early in your career, right? Building a career out of it is not defined by which company opened for you on your intern day.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you
that's
for
very
that.
good advice. And I think,
Yeah, that was a great advice from your side. Okay, so now I guess like we are done with all the questions for this wonderful evening. And I would like to wholeheartedly thank the entire panel for taking our time from the busy schedules to share such honest and practical advice with all of us. And we will definitely love to see you all in the upcoming sessions as well. And I'm sure the session has given everyone more clarity regarding the entire internship process and what to do and specifically what to not, and will give them a definite head start in the internship journey. And I would like to thank all the attendees for their enthusiastic participation in the session and all the very best for the internship journey ahead. And for any further queries, you may feel free to reach out to us anytime. And just to clarify the things out, we will soon be releasing the relevant resources regarding the session soon on the dedicated WhatsApp groups. And once again, all the very best for the internship. See you all in future SARC events. And once again, would like to thank the entire panel for coming and dedicating their time for us. So yeah, have a great day and obviously a internship ahead. So thank you guys. Thank you so much.
yeah, thanks, guys, and all the best.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having us. All the best.
Thank you so much.
All the best to everyone for the internship season.